Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Spaziani, and I am one of the directors here at the Sexual Health Alliance. Today, I'm here with one of our upcoming amazing presenters, Jasmine Johnson. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Jasmine, if to get started, do you just want to tell us a little bit about your role as both a therapist and a sex worker and how those two professions overlap a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing is dancing in a club many moons ago, before even getting into school for into my master's program, I realized like, wow, these guys just want someone to talk to. At that time, I was like, so everybody, all the other dancers around me are like busting their butt, like doing these amazing tricks and dancing and working up a sweat, and I am making the exact same equivalent, sitting here and sharing space with this person. And so that was like my first intersection of I had just graduated with a degree in sociology, so that like desire to learn about how people think and behave, and the sex world, it was like instant, like, wow, there's an intersection here. And so fast forward, I decided to go to school and get licensed as a psychotherapist, and was moving along in the world rather comfortably, but pretty boring, for at least for what I felt was my standard of life.
Right.
And I wanted to really explore my own sexuality, my own uniqueness, my own kind of like breakout moment. Who do I want to be? I had did the school thing, had the good straight and narrow job, had the kids, and it's like, okay, what else? And so I started to throw toy parties, and again, that intersection at the end of the toy parties, we would have all this fun, and we would, say like all of these like lewd things and all this stuff. But at the end, it always came down to what felt like a support group. Um, at the time, it was, groups of women just really talking about how they felt, either oppressed sexually. They didn't feel like they were satisfied, but didn't feel like they could articulate that with their partner. They had a lot of sexual shame and hangups with their own bodies. There was a lot of social pressure to appear a particular way. And again, it's like a magic moment where you're like, I'm pretty sure I came here to sell dildos. And somehow we are here talking about what it's like to be a mom and want to feel sexy. Another intersection. Fast forward, I had moved up to like the highest point in my career. I was a program manager for a large government organization. And again, I see how bureaucracy, how even religion and our own personal hangups around sex and sexuality were having a huge impact on people's medical care. And so I was able to kind of influence that program and bring intimacy into the conversation, and helping providers have conversations with their clients, with their patients, about how, like, okay, these are all your discharge instructions, but no one's talked to you about how to relate with your loved one now that you have a TBI, or how to relate to your loved one now that you've had this traumatic heart attack. What does sex look like for the both of you now? And so helping physicians, nurses, other types of clinicians have these kind of conversations in a very normalized way. So this, I mean, for the whole, my entire adult life, entire adult working life, I have found those intersections between sex and wellness, and continue to do so.
I love that, Jasmine. I think you highlighted really just how these two professions really do overlap. And I think we need to recognize that more because it's just not talked about in this way. And it's so valid and it's so true. So thank you for sharing that. It gave me goosebumps hearing about that. So thank you.
Absolutely. I've never shared that in that chronological way. But that just and just sharing with you, I'm like, yeah, it's been here all along, and it will continue to.
Of course.
It will continue to.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of moving into that, how these professions do overlap. I know that you're a part of the Pineapple Support Network, and so for those who don't know, Pineapple Support is a network that supports the mental health of anyone in the adult industry, sex work community. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you work with their mission and maybe how sex workers feel more comfortable with you being in the sex work industry yourself?
Yeah, so Pineapple Support, I'm so fortunate to have been with them since their inception and really seeing that groundwork. I mean, it is the epitome of both sex work and mental health support. I mean, it's going to a conference like Exotica, and seeing Leia, the founder of Pineapple Support, like running around her cute like little shorts or little tops, and like saying like, wouldn't you want to help sex workers have mental health care? Don't you? And like just her approach, it was just so awesome to watch, and then to be a part of it, and then for it to be a huge part of my practice. So yeah, I do see a large number of my clients are sex workers through Pineapple Support. And one of the things that I love and matches so perfectly is accessible mental health care. That they figured that out in a very beautiful way, promoting and marketing mental health care to the people that you actually want to seek the services. I have never, prior to Pineapple Support, seen a one of my flyers for a support group with like 4 women in bikinis, right? But like, it got my attention, it gets everybody's attention, and it's that kind of like that shocker. But again, the intersection, yes, somebody who uses their body, uses and uses their every single faculty as a sex worker. You are using every single faculty, from your body, your thoughts, your emotions, to connect with your clients. There is no wonder that if we only did our job alone, we should have an outlet in terms of a therapeutic space. There Unfortunately, there's rarely any human that is able to just focus on their job alone, right? That doesn't have life stressors, lifestyle stressors, the world stressors, financial stressors, like all health concerns, all of those things. And when you think of a sex worker that has all of those competing challenges and is taking on so much emotional labor of their clients, as well as physical labor, and don't have a safe place to reach out and get mental health support. And a safe place, I don't just mean that from the really awkward and strange and traumatizing things that therapists tend to say to sex workers, but also safe from this perspective of, you can just say what it is that you do. You can just say what it is that you saw at work today, and allow that to frame your emotions, opposed to having to keep a lot of that in and only share your emotions without any context. That really makes the job of the therapist hard, and it certainly makes the experience for the sex worker that much more challenging. So I love that Pineapple Support is right there in your face, advertising to sex workers. They are, in order for you to even sign up, you have to share your sex work. Like, that's beautiful, right? Where normally it's like, oh my gosh, to sign up, I better hide this for any other service that we may want. For Pineapple Support, that's a requirement. Like, you've got to be a sex worker for this benefit. And it's been amazing. I always disclose to my clients that I am also a forward-facing sex worker, and I really am sharing that with them for the safety of just disclosure, informed consent, and also in case we ever like run into each other on Twitter or at Exotica or any of those places, right? No surprises. And before I can even get the reason why I'm sharing that out to them, they're already like, sold, good, that's fine. Say less, and I'm like, okay, but we should like make sure we're a good match, and I don't want you to make a decision. They're like, no, decision has been made. And so that relatability is huge.
Yeah, no, that is so beautiful. I think you really like explained Pineapple Support perfectly when you said it's a safe place. I'm also a volunteer on that site as a listener, and
Beautiful.
I can't agree with you more about just how amazing it is for people to be able to recognize and say out loud without facing the stigma from the
Mhm.
therapist or the listener, whatever that might look like. So
Right, right.
very powerful place. So thank you for sharing and being a part of it.
For sure. It's an honor.
Yeah. So, talking about the stigma a little bit, being in both professions, do you face any stigma from mental health professionals? And if so, how do you navigate this?
Yeah, I do. I know that I do. Does it ever quite make it in my face? No.
Mhm.
I think I'm scary to some therapists. I think the idea of somebody who's so bold as to being able to put both their body and their brain for sale is a scary person. And the reason why I say that, and it may just be, you know, their value set, like they wouldn't even want to speak to a person like me, and that's okay too. But I hear it through our network. Like, you know, honestly, Black therapists, Black licensed therapists are a very small percentage of the mental health community. So anything that's usually said or circulating about one of us, it gets back, right? So there are a couple of groups that when an article in Psychology Today went out, that was one of the more prominent articles that was very forward facing, very, you know, clearly she's a sex worker. You could see her sex work stuff here. She's a therapist. You could see her therapy things here. When that got out and started circulating around the therapy community, some of my dear friends were sending me screenshots of like the really god awful things that people were saying about me, like you can't do that. And that in itself is so interesting because this article is literally showcasing that I'm doing it. So yes, you may not want to do it, you may not understand why someone would, but yes, you can do it. And, you know, people do really bring forward their own judgments and their feelings about sex and their feelings about shame and their feelings about the purity of our profession, which it really should not be, you know. But when they are passing judgment and they are making stigmatized remarks or trying to sully my experience of what I am actually currently doing, and it really just showcases how much more important it is that I keep doing what I am doing and doing it forward facing, because those attitudes exist. The very attitudes that I'm talking about in terms of re-traumatization, judgment, stigmatizing your own community that you serve, suggesting that mental health should only be relatable and available to these type of people, but not these type of people. Like, you know, women should have other women therapists that they can relate to. Black women should have other Black women therapists. Children should have people that specialize in play therapy. But sex workers, y'all, no. That's where the buck stops, right? So, you know, I'll give you an example that I found was really interesting, and this kind of frames how I have allowed myself to really not deal with the stigma, and not deal with people's opinions. I remember when I first became licensed and I was working for this government agency in the medical world, and they were having support groups, and one of the lead facilitators for a substance abuse support group was a social worker, and he was also a recovering alcoholic. And he had been going to AA groups out in the community, and he'd been working as a social worker. And there was a lot of grunting about like, how can somebody who is like outward facing, going to support groups, lead a support group in this space? And then there was the, well, you know, just, it's not illegal, let them do it. And I remember thinking, like, why would we punish someone who is actually doing the very thing that we want our clients to do? Seek help, right? Get well and help others do the same thing. You know, and they were willing to punish this person. Granted, he was a straight white man, so like he got to host his group and was a hero for it. And I always kept that in my back pocket, that I am the example of what I want for my clients in a lot of cases, which is be free, you know, be who you are, take care of yourself, take care of your family, explore your life, do it in a way that hurts as little people as possible, that causes yourself as little harm as possible, and don't apologize for existing uniquely in the way that you exist. So how could I say this with one mouth but then be feeling shame? And like, I can't. That doesn't sit well with me. So when these things come, stigma, questions that are slanted, judgment, these screenshots of these awful conversations that people have, it really just tells me this is exactly why you have to keep being such a bully, you have to keep putting this in people's face, because it can be done. And if you're not a model to your own, to your own profession, to your own, within your own life, then maybe you should reconsider your self-care regimen. I'll just say it that way.
No, absolutely. And you talk about this idea of just authenticity. And I think that's who we're supposed to be as therapists, is authentic. And when people are, contributing to this stigma, it strips the therapist of their humanity, their authenticity. So I'm here for changing the field. I'm ready for it, and I cannot give you enough praise. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I know you talked a little bit about this with the pineapple support conversation, but do you mention or disclose it all to clients who might not be coming to you for sex work or anything related? Do you disclose to them about this?
I do. I do. A lot of clients, for the most part, are very much aware. They have found me through word of mouth. They have found me through social media. I don't even, it's rare if I have like a listing on a kind of like super vanilla dry like therapy recommendation board, just so that for a couple of reasons. One is I like the tribe. I like the referral channels where things are coming from, pineapple support, and people who are well aware of all of the work that I do. But every now and again, people may not know exactly how far into the industry I'm in. And I always have a conversation. It's part of me introducing myself, right? So when someone comes to any therapist, I think it is important for us to introduce who we are. We may not go into the details, how many kids we, and all of these other kind of things, but it's important to know, I'm a mom. I have this as my past professional history. These are the things that are really important to me, so that again, you can make a good match. We have therapists that disclose their religion because they want that relatability. We have therapists that share their sexual orientation for, again, that relatability. And so in my situation, because we're talking about introducing myself, it would be strange for me to say, like, yeah, so I've had this therapy practice for the last X amount of years, and I like, a solution focus, and kind of leave out that you might be scrolling on Twitter one night at 2 a.m, and if you turn this way, like, that's me. Like, I don't want the shock factor, the shock value. I also don't want my clients to open up their can of worms of life to me and then find out that they feel uncomfortable with me. So it is important for me to give them an opportunity to make that decision for themselves. And so the conversation may sound like, I do want to disclose that I am also a sex worker. I do have some explicit content that is online. We don't ever have to talk about that in this space, but I want to be forthcoming, because I never want you to find out something from someone else or from online. If it makes you uncomfortable or if it challenges our relationship, let's have a talk about it. And we can talk about it now, we can talk about it if it ever gets uncomfortable, or we can choose to make a recommendation to someone that you might feel more aligned with if it does make you uncomfortable at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think it also turns itself into an opportunity for conversation, which is
Yeah.
powerful in itself. So I can't agree.
Conversation usually, as of late, it sounds like, well, I'm happy to know that because I'm thinking about doing some sex work myself because the way things are going, and you know, it's just like, good.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that is a perfect segue into my next question because, you know, the year we're living in right now, it's so much social unrest going on. And so I'm curious to know about what are some of the, at least in your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges that sex workers or adult performers of any kind are facing right now?
Mhm. Well, I think we are under a lot of challenges politically. I do think, you know, there's a lot of policies in place that the general public you know, are also faced with, but usually anything like, let's just say healthcare, 10 times harder for sex workers to access. You know, anything that is a social ill, you just want to magnify it for any marginalized or highly stigmatized community. So I think that's important. And you know, even like place an emphasis on normalizing sex workers' problems to a certain extent, because oftentimes it's like, oh, like, you know, they're worried about, I don't know, you know, being picked up for prostitution or for tax issues. And like, yeah, those are depending on where you live and how you structure your business, those may be some things, but like everyday things are an issue for us. COVID-19 really, really showcased how our state and government feel about us, because we as sex workers, file our taxes, pay our taxes, we operate under the limit, you know, the laws in our cities and in our country for recording or you know, creating content. We're on campsites, not even making direct content with or contact with clients. You know, we are following the law as far as it will allow us to perform our sex work. We follow it, but we were not allowed to access any of those funds for small businesses to keep ourselves afloat during the time of COVID-19. We were not able to access unemployment as an independent contractor or a self-employed person. And it says so explicitly in many states how anyone that does, you know, I can't remember quite the name, but you know, something that has like, you know, some moral, something that you would like, you know, turn your moral nose up to, is not covered under this loan or grant or what have you. So that's when we really start to see how sex workers are down the chain of what we consider for our humanity. You know, if something is equitable for one person and it's not equitable for the other, who is also operating under the same limits and laws, what are we saying? We're saying we just don't like you because of the type of work that you do. We don't care if you're a contributing member to society or if you have children that are not a part, or you know, a family that don't do sex work. You have stained you've stained your family unit, you've stained your business space because of the type of work that you do. That's really disheartening. But I would say that is probably the current biggest issue for sex workers across the country right now.
Yeah, that is incredibly disheartening. I feel that. And I'm just glad that we're here to kind of open that conversation up and hopefully just begin to normalize it a little bit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
With this talk about the sex work industry, something that I discuss often in some of the human sexuality classes I help teach is using porn as sex education. So do you believe that people in our country are using porn as sex education, and what are the pros and cons to this in your mind?
I do. I think that porn is the primary source of sex education, and it's really unfortunate because I do think that there are some amazing things that we can learn from any art form. We can learn from any material. I think that learning is, it's like learning material is whatever you make it. However, the disadvantage is that there's so much pornography that's completely out of context. There is, people watch porn out of context, not realizing that they are watching entertainment. So if you don't know that the stunts were not done by the actor on the screen, or you don't know that this person like trains for hours and weeks to be able to do some of the sexual acts that are displayed so easily, you could really put yourself in a potentially dangerous in a potentially dangerous situation. So I think people like to think that when you say sex education, we tend to think of like this middle schooler, right? But sex education is along the continuum, right? It starts much earlier than middle school and it continues long after high school. And so when we think about when people are accessing porn, we might say like, oh, well, like they're, 18 or 19, it's legal. Everything that's legal is not good. I will say that a lot of really strange things were legal at some point in time. But a still very impressionable brain looking at material that's not in context without any guidance can be very dangerous, on top of the fact that porn has some really dangerous narratives in and with itself. If you look at some of the racial tropes, the sexism, the homophobia, the transphobia, all the obias and the isms can be found in porn. And if people are accessing that wildly, and I say wildly because if you think of where can I jump on a sex ed class versus where can I jump on for some sex entertainment, like I can get porn on this screen in 2.5 seconds. It's going to take me probably 2.5 days to determine which education module and speaker, you know what I mean? So it's so accessible. So to think that it's not a primary source of education is really to be naive. And I think for those of us who are sex educators, we just like, no, like I'm the primary source for education. It's like, no, it's okay. Take your ego, stroke it, put it back in a nice little box, because you're not. You are probably coming in after all of the trauma has taken place with seeing that stuff out of context, trying to apply it to some other person's body and realizing, oh, it's not like in the movies, and then people try to access more formal education. So my opinion is it could be used as great supplemental material. I think that as educators and therapists, if we accept that we are not people's primary source or primary go-to, and that porn is much more accessible and people will get their cues from it, then we can really tailor the kind of work that we do with people with that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agreed with that. And I think, with it being so accessible, obviously, so many people are using porn, watching porn. And, I think it's common that people report feelings of guilt after watching porn. What would you say to people who report guilty feelings?
Yeah. One, I always like to say, like, whose voice is it? I like to help my clients figure out where the source of that guilt is coming from. 9 times out of 10, it's not the actual particular porn that they're watching, because a lot of people will have that same response no matter if they're watching a love scene or if they're watching something that is just like totally, like whatever out there for them. And it comes down to usually someone shaming them early on, or even especially for women, like, this idea like women are not supposed to, and then there goes the laundry list of different things. So tends to be a lot of guilt and shame around needing porn, like the fact, like, why do I even need porn to get excited? What's wrong with inspiration? Taking that shame away. Like, sometimes we need inspiration to do anything. We listen to music when we want to change our mood. And sometimes we use porn to help change our mood and get into a more sexy space. So really helping people relinquish that, like this robot, like we're automatically turned on and hot all the time because that's how it looks in the movies, right? Every commercial is like, I'm ready, to helping people that oftentimes they're feeling shame, sometimes because the style of porn, because it doesn't look, and we're going to talk about this so much in the conference about how our fetishes are, you know, we have rarely have given people space to explore those and to own them and to normalize fetishes and things that are outside of, you know, vanilla mainstream sex that we may have grown up seeing in movies and things like that. Like that's okay, you know. And then the other thing is the shame of like people who watch porn are, and then the laundry list of things. So I like to help people focus on whose voice is it, where does that messaging come from, do you still honor that messaging? Like, you know, I was raised in the Catholic Church. I don't honor the messaging of the Catholic Church, so why am I honoring it in my most vulnerable time? That's that little piece that has yet to be let go. And I also help people focus on, but how did you feel in the moment before the shame came and set in? What were you feeling? It's like all these beautiful emotions. I felt free. I felt connected to my body. I felt out of this world, you know? And so it's like, there's that. And then there's shame. Which one do we want to get rid of?
Totally. I love when you just said about this feeling of being free, because that is just so, so real. I feel it in my body.
Right?
Amazing. So I know an article just came out with you and your partner in the Huffington Post about sex work and also your work to decolonize Black and brown bodies. So do you just want to tell us a little bit more about the representation of Black and brown bodies and people of any color in the adult film industry?
Absolutely. So, one of the interesting things many years ago, King, my partner is King Noir. King and I set out, we knew something wasn't right in the industry. Part of the reason why I even got in the industry is because there was such a poor representation of women of color, of women of a particular age. And even, you know, I just feel like porn has overwhelmingly dumbed women down. You know, and completely objectified us. And again, like I said earlier, any marginalized community or group of people, anything that you're experiencing, just go ahead and multiply that times, you know, a couple 100,000, whatever, if you will. So women being objectified is one offense, but then Black women being objectified is like, again, multiply it, right? So you know, I was talking to lots of women. We're kind of like doing our own little research study during our travels around the world, and it was like, I would watch porn if, then, you know, if the, you know, people didn't sound like they were, you know, like, I don't know, like they were not, they didn't have two brain synapses going on in their brain. If it didn't seem like it was non-consensual, if it didn't seem like we were only there to, you know, show our ass or show, you know, our big Black cock and all, like all of these kind of terms that are used to fetishize and objectify Black people. And, you know, the more and more I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, I haven't ever actually watched a porn not on off of mute, because it's so offensive, the things that are often said. This is like the kind of sex that if I heard someone saying this to me, I would get up and be like, you know, out, you go. But we're being subjected to this as part of our pleasure. Like, it doesn't, you know, why is watching something that's embarrassing or shameful supposed to be part of my self-care regimen? That doesn't seem right. So we wanted to create art that was more representative of us as humans enjoying intimacy. And so as of late, like within the last 6 months of the most recent uprisings, we've had a chance to really convene through the BIPOC collective with other Black performers, and just sitting and having conversations like this as a group and going like, oh my gosh, that happened to me too. Wow, you put out a movie and then 6 months later when it comes out, it has some horrible title on it that the producer didn't tell you that they were gonna, you know, as 12 inches of slave, you know, like who makes up these things, which won an award. I'll just share that with you. Yeah. All right. So, these kind of tropes and these mockeries of our bodies, our existence in this country, and then it's distributed widely without our consent, our full consent, meaning we may have been there to do the actual act, but we had no idea how it was going to be packaged, what the copy was going to be on it, how we were going to be deduced in that advertisement, and it was going to be promoted. And so, these awful titles that make mockeries, like Black Lives Matter. There's these companies called like Porn Patrol. I'm probably saying the wrong words, but that really take our life and death experiences in this country and create pornography out of it. And like these things can't continue, knowing that we are such a valuable asset to the porn community. And the reason why I can say that is because every year I look at the statistics of the porn statistics. The tube sites usually put it out once a year. And there has not been a year that people of color are not one of the top 10 searches, that older women are not one of the top 10 searches. So the general global community is looking for content that that make it very, very clear that they want to see Black, brown, all colors, all types of bodies and people represented. But the mainstream, the folks that produce the material, the folks that award the material, that distribute the material, that hire for the material, are not making that value connection. They're continuing to not value the voices. There's not enough Black performers for the amount of porn that's sold under interracial, ebony, BBC. It's not reflective of leadership positions in the porn industry. We're not shooting ourselves. We are not lighting ourselves. We're not doing our own makeup. We are not producing. We're not in these production meetings. But somehow we are up there with the most valuable product. That's not okay. It's not okay in the porn industry, and honestly, it's not okay in any other industry. And I can take that into sports. I can take that into entertainment, into music, anywhere where Black people are overwhelmingly and public-facingly exceeding and sought after, but are not the ownership. The ownership doesn't reflect, the leadership doesn't reflect, and the pay equity doesn't reflect either. So yeah, porn's no different. It's just it's a microcosm, and it's one that is a little bit more explicit in language, that in terms of being able to tell you like, oh, we're not shooting any more Black girls this year, or oh, do you think you could turn around and twerk? Your sports agent may not say that, but in so many words, they're still asking you to tap dance so that they can make more money than you do doing the actual work.
Wow. Sorry,
that was a mouthful. I'm passionate about it though.
No, yeah, I am too. And I can't say that I'm shocked, but it is, again, disheartening. And I am just glad that we are starting to have some of these real conversations and bringing it to light. And, I think this really brings up the topic too of just ethical versus unethical porn. How do you have any advice on how people can source ethical porn and make sure that they are supporting companies and productions that are doing things for the right reasons?
Mm-hmm. So, I've been kind of toying with this for some time, because I have been asked quite often, like, for some recommendations of ethical porn. And the challenge that I keep coming up with is, we can have varied extremes of our ethics. Just like, let's just say you and I, you and I can have some very different varying ranges of our value set and what makes us feel comfortable, what makes us feel whole when it comes to our sexual entertainment. And so because of that, I have been taking a step back of making recommendations of like which sites to go and see. But I've been putting it on the consumer. How do you feel when you're watching this? When you find yourself only wanting to look up, let's just say, interracial porn, just to continue on the conversation that we're having. What about it? Are you enjoying? Taking a look and doing some self-reflection. Does the material that I'm ingesting reflect the person that I am and the person that I want to be?
Mhm.
You know, I will give you an example of this, a personal example. And this is, I think it is important, especially as therapists, to talk in these kind of situations about our own personal growth, because then we normalize for our clients and our audience that it's a journey and you can jump on board and get with it if you want to, right? So we know that there have been some derogatory terms that have been used towards trans people in our really recent past. And porn is always the last to let go of negative terminology, because they can get away with it the longest, right? It can all be under the guise of porn, right? As if that this is some alternate reality, and it's not. It's very much, and as easy as you can pick up your phone is how true the porn is to your reality. And so I actually like trans porn quite a lot. It's been really, it's entertaining. It's really nice to see different type of chemistry, different types of sexual acts that can be done. The beauty of a body that has been transitioned to the way that the performer loves and is expressing to the world. There's a lot of beauty. But what I found is that in looking and watching this porn, I wasn't at the cusp of us really becoming very conscious of how we use, trans woman, trans man, and transgender person. I wasn't taking full responsibility that the work that the scenes that I was watching, the titling was still using old terminology that was now deemed as derogatory, right? I have a responsibility to my own personal ethics and values that if I am going to support something, I need to support it fully in the way that the people want to be represented as I want the same for me. I don't want someone to say to me like, oh, Jasmine, I love your work. It's titled like naughty N-word. Like, no, why is that still, like, why is that still circulating? Or, like, I wouldn't want anyone to access me under that title, right? So why was I doing the same thing? And I can't just go like, oh, it's just the title. No, it's not, right? So ethical porn for me became finding content that I liked, that made me feel good, didn't make me feel yucky afterwards. It didn't make me feel like I was, like watching anything that was non-consensual or anything that was objectifying, but even that it needed to be titled in a way that showed respect to the people in it. So it's a long example, but it's my personal example of how we can actually find our own ethical content by doing some self-reflection of what makes us feel good, what are our value sets, and looking at our content accordingly. Look at the last 3 things that you watched. Would you be comfortable if it was on the front page? Like, probably not in general, just because porn is really personal. But if it did make its way to the front page, could you feel proud about it? And if the answer is no, it's probably not ethical.
Right. No, I love that. That's a much deeper conversation than I've heard from other professionals about how to access ethical porn. And I love it because it's beyond just how you feel afterwards, but doing the macro level change beyond just brushing it off and saying, oh, well, it's a way.
It's out there. Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And everything, like I've heard people say, like, look for things that are titled feminist, right? Look for things that are titled ethical porn, and I'm all for that. But we live in a world of SEOs and hashtags, right? And you can, like, just because something has a hashtag, a title, and is categorized, it doesn't mean that it's been vetted and approved by any regulating anything, because there is no regulations and no particular standards for how to use those terms. So it is important that you have a buyer beware process of your own, because we've seen lots of things sold to us with pretty fancy labeling, but the content or the product itself is really not what is reflected in that term.
Yeah, exactly. And even though we are seeing more ethical porn being produced, it's still not where I think we'd like it to see. And there's still a lot of unethical porn circulating. So that's very important. And thank you for sharing your examples with us.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned your partner, and I know that you and King do much more than just porn. So I know that you offer, some sex positive parenting classes.
We do.
So what kind of topics do you cover when talking to parents about sex and sexuality with their kids?
Mhm. Yeah, we start with the parents. They always jump in like, just tell us what to tell our kids. Like how do we make them stop doing this or do that or don't.
Right.
And it's like, just let's roll it back, because really what we pass on to our children, we need to actually have something to pass on, right? And what are you going to pass on? Are you passing on your new values, your new thoughts, your new healthy attitudes? Or are you passing on what was given to you? Um, and and so we really start with asking parents, how did they learn about sex, and really help them understand their journey. And it's like you see the light bulbs go, oh, I don't want to do that to my kid. Like, oh, I remember being yelled at, or I remember being told this was going to happen. And it's like giving them, more than anything, usually the roadmap of what not to do. Right. And just by kind of like going back, everybody's like, I'm going to be a better parent than my parent. But that means that you actually need to kind of like look at what was good and what was bad, what you want to bring forward and what you want to correct. So we talk about that. We talk about the fact, the easy access to porn and what kind of safeguards they can use to help kind of extend the time that their children will, from the time that their children will be exposed to content, and how to prep them for what they are likely going to run into. We talk about using song lyrics, commercials, any forward-facing, public-facing media that is already out there, to start having conversations with your children about sex and sexuality and their opinions about it. That recent song that came out, Wet Ass Pussy by Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion. Well, we have teenage daughters, and like, I love the song. I think it's awesome. Super woman empowerment, right? But my kids are walking around, they're like, they're doing a little dance, and I'm like, exactly what does that song mean to you? And they're like, oh, Mom, but it's like, it's content. It's right there. It's an educational opportunity, and how these opportunities are like always right there for us as parents. We just have to have the courage and the permission to pick it up and run with it. We work with parents on, a lot of sex worker parents, about how to disclose to your children the type of work that you do, kind of what type of increments are age appropriate, how to keep keep your family and yourself safe legally with children and being a sex worker, because that can get really challenging with stigma. Mm-hmm. And then finally, we help parents work on staying each other, although they have children. No matter what age, modeling healthy intimacy is important to our children. So always like trying to find a way to like run away from the kids to be intimate. We kind of help parents figure out a good balance of what's healthy intimacy in front of your children, and how to express to your children that you need alone time with your partners as well, and what that looks like and how you want to be respected. So really just setting boundaries with your children that just happen to be around intimacy, sex, and sexuality.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I know in my own experience, I didn't learn anything about intimacy from my own parents, and I think
Right.
we don't hear that very often. So that's beautiful. So beautiful. Um, how with your own kids, how do you guys work on being sex positive with them? I know you mentioned a little bit about that, but maybe tell us a little bit more about your personal experience.
Yeah. Boundary setting from jump. One of the things that we did with our kids really early is allowing them to establish autonomy of their body, for two reasons. One, from the point of safety. If you have autonomy of your body, of your person, then you can make rules for it, rules of engagement and disengagement. You can exercise, consent, and withdraw consent if you feel like you have power over your body. So that's something that we just, even from the baby, honoring. If I'm giving him snuggles and he's like, no, like, that's a no. Put him down. No matter how bad you need those snuggles, Mom, you got two other kids to pick from. So that, and then with the girls, as they've gotten older, policing their bodies, and that's been really interesting, because I always say my first reaction is my mother's reaction, the second one is mine, and the third is who I want to be. So My daughter, like, let's just say the last week she dyed her hair pink. My first reaction, my mother's reaction is, oh my God, why? My second one was, well, you better make sure that you don't damage your hair. And then my third one was like, you know what, girl, do it. Go magenta all the way, you know, because we have our entire lives to be policed, especially as women. You know, people are right now in this country, they are, a group of men are getting together to think about what judge is going to be the best to police our bodies over the remainder of our lifetime.
Right.
So why do we have to police our children? Especially like her hair being pink, she's not applying for a job. And if she was, then we need to be talking about respectability politics. Like, is that really, you know, is that dye seeping into your brain, not allowing you to perform? No. But so that's really big is, and I sent a message to my daughter and I asked her, was I a little too intense? This is the 19-year-old. Was I a little too intense with you and growing up, while you were growing up, like to date, what do you think? And she said, you were really intense about me making decisions that made me happy. And she found that to be the highest pressure point of me not saying like, you should do this, but me going, well, what do you think? What do you want to do? And are you sure? Do you know what the benefits to that? Do you know what the consequences? Can you deal with the consequences of it? Okay, cool. 9 times out of 10, she's like, yeah, I can't deal with those consequences. And I'm like, okay, well, then you've made your decision. But that, like decision making, so much of these non-sex related concepts are the things that drive our ability to engage with our partners or even with ourselves. I think there's such a focus on teaching children about to have sex or not to have sex with this person or not, to protect yourself or not protect yourself. If you teach your children how to make good, healthy decisions for themselves, some of those things will come more naturally. If you teach your children how to talk about how they feel, how to assert themselves when they want something or don't want something, that will trickle into their sexual conversations. A lot of our sexual hangups come from not having education around other type of social interactions or having a space and a voice and permission to do. So that's kind of my approach, at least these days with the girls, is not policing them and appreciating and honoring those no's from our little one.
Yeah, and overall autonomy is what I'm hearing too. Just embracing that and allowing for it. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
As we're wrapping up here, I kind of just want to know a little bit about what does the future hold for you? What are some of your future goals and plans?
Well, one of the super obvious ones is getting this work done with the Sexual Health Alliance. I am like so excited. We have lots of really, really cool collaborations planned together. And I am really looking forward to engaging more at a macro level with therapists and doing more train the trainer style projects and expanding what therapy can look like for all humans if we have providers that are trauma informed, that are aware of how their own personal obias and isms make their way into people's lives and can be detrimental. I am really looking forward to some recent projects that King and I have coming up with helping sex workers look at ways to age through the industry, right? This doesn't have to be, this is our industry. Like there should be a place in it when you're 18 to when you're ready to retire. And whether that's in front of the camera or behind it, like there is space for you, for your body type, for your views, for all of it. Really helping sex workers really bring their skill sets beyond the physicality of the work that we do, and helping them bring that to part of their brand to expand and diversify their earnings, much like we've done. So those are some of the things that they're, you know, kind of like my big ticket items, but you're going to see a lot of that rolling out soon.
That's amazing to hear. I'm eager to see more about this.
Awesome.
So here's your red carpet moment. I want to lay out the red carpet for you and just kind of give you the opportunity to tell people where we can find you.
Yes. So for all things therapy, you can find me at bluepearltherapyllc.org, or actually that's bluepearltherapy.org. You can find all sex work related stuff at jetsettingjasmine.com. Yeah, any of those main headers, you can Google me, Jet Setting Jasmine. Have fun with that. And on all social medias, also under Blue Pearl Therapy and Jet Setting Jasmine.